This is a survival story set aboard an old cargo ship haunted by his supernatural forces. Michael Thompson, a deckhand driven by desperation, finds himself confronted with strange rules and eerie events. As he navigates the treacherous waters and the mysterious phenomena aboard the Nerius, he must learn to distinguish between reality and the unknown to stay alive. I stepped off the bus at Terminal 5, the sharp smell of diesel fumes filling the air as I adjusted the strap on my worn duffel bag. 3 months of unemployment had drained my savings to nearly nothing, and this cargo trip to Alaska was my last chance to make rent next month instead of sleeping in my car. The recruiter's vacall had mentioned only that they needed an experienced deckhand for a 2-week round trip to Anchorage. Navigating through the labyrinth of shipping containers and cranes, I followed the slip numbers until I stood before berth 47. The vessel before me sat low in the water, her hull streaked with rust and her faded paint showing its age. It clearly hadn't seen fresh coat for years. She looked as if she'd been braving these waters for decades or more. Not the modern ship I had hoped for, but work was work. A few longshoremen finished the loading, their voices carrying over the water as they secured the last containers. Checking my watch, for 30 p.m., right on schedule. The ship was set to depart within the hour, according to my papers. "You, Thompson," a voice called out, a tall, broad-shouldered man approaching from the gangplank. He appeared to be in his 50s, salt and pepper hair, a thick beard with more gray than black, and a long scar running from his left temple down to his jawline. His steel blue eyes met mine with such intensity, one felt the urge to double-check my shirt buttons. "That's me, Michael Thompson, Captain William Harrison," he said, offering a handshake firm enough to crack knuckles. "Welcome aboard the Nerius. Ready to get underway?" "Absolutely, Captain. Looking forward to it." He gave a single nod and beckoned me to follow him up the gangplank. The deck felt solid, though the metal was worn, marred with countless dents and scratches. The ship's battle scars from years at sea. "I'll show you to your quarters soon," Captain Harrison said as we headed toward the superstructure. "But first, there's something important we need to discuss." He led me into a cramped office off the main deck, closing the door behind us. The space was tidy but cluttered with charts and shipping manifests pinned to every wall. He gestured for me to sit in one of 2 metal chairs facing his desk. "Thompson, I'm about to give you instructions that might sound strange, even unbelievable. They're not suggestions. These are rules, and following them precisely might save your life." I shifted in the uncomfortable chair. "What do you mean, save my life?" Instead of directly answering, Captain Harrison pulled a piece of paper from his desk drawer and slid it toward me. It was a handwritten list in neat block letters. "Read these, memorize them, and never share them with other crew members." I picked up the paper, noting the indentations etched into it from his pen. 5 rules were laid out. 1. Never throw anything overboard, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. 2. Do not go on deck between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. for any reason. 3. If you hear a woman sobbing anywhere on the ship, lock yourself in the nearest room and wait until the sound stops completely. 4. Always verify that crew members have visible faces before approaching or speaking to them. 5. If the power goes out and you hear a child crying, you have exactly 10 minutes to find the captain. If you can't, barricade yourself in the nearest secure location until power returns. I read and reread the list, certain it was some elaborate prank. "Captain, with all due respect, what are you talking about?" "Verify faces." It sounded like something from a horror movie. His expression didn't change. "This is about survival, Thompson. These rules aren't up for debate. Follow them, or you won't make it home." My stomach nodded. "Are you saying the ship is dangerous? Because if there's a safety issue, the Nerius is seaworthy. Engines run fine, hulls solid, navigation equipment works. This is about something else entirely," he said, standing as if to end the conversation. "Just follow the rules exactly. That's all you need to know for now." He paused at the door. "Oh, and Dave and James, The other crew, they won't talk about the ship's history or anything unusual. Don't press them. It won't help anyone." Before I could ask more, he stepped back onto the deck. I folded the list and slipped it into my jacket pocket, mind racing with questions. Maybe he was joking. Maybe it was a test. But the deadly earnest look he wore when talking about survival told me this was no joke. Outside, 2 other crew members prepared to set sail. A wiry Asian man with a burn scar on his right hand and a burly man with graying hair and a red bandana. "Thompson, meet David Shun and James Rodriguez. They'll show you the ropes," Captain Harrison said. They nodded and shook my hand, their focus wholly on getting underway. As I followed them to my quarters, I couldn't shake the feeling that this voyage aboard the Nerius was going to be unlike any other. Captain William Harrison sat me down in his cramped office, the weight of the sea pressing in around us. With a solemn expression, he slid a worn piece of paper across the metal desk, a list of 5 rules, each one more peculiar than the last. He told me these weren't mere suggestions. They were mandates to ensure our survival against threats far beyond the natural. The first rule struck me as almost trivial. Never throw anything overboard, no matter how insignificant it seemed. Yet, the gravity in his voice told me it was anything but ordinary. Next, I was warned never to set foot on deck between the hours of 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., a window of time shrouded in eerie silence and unseen dangers. The third rule chilled me deeply. If I ever heard a woman sobbing anywhere aboard the Nerius, I must immediately lock myself inside the nearest secure room and wait until the cries had completely ceased. No exceptions. Then came the necessity to verify. Every single crew member must have a visible face before I approached or engaged with them. It sounded absurd, like something on a nightmare, but I quickly learned its critical importance. Finally, the 5th rule detailed what to do during a power outage. If I heard a child cry in the dark, I had exactly 10 minutes to locate Captain Harrison. Failing that, I was to barricade myself in the closest secure room and wait for the lights to return. Captain Harrison's gaze was unwavering as he delivered this grim set of commands. "Follow these rules to the letter, Thompson," he said quietly, "or you won't make it home." The weight of his words settled heavily on me, marking the beginning of a journey where survival depended not just on skill, but on trust in these eerie edicts. As I was securing the tie-down straps on a row of containers, a chilling sound drifted through the cargo hold, a woman crying somewhere deep within the ship. The sobbing seemed to emanate from the metal walls themselves, soft yet unmistakable. I paused, flashlight in hand, trying to locate the source. The sound seemed elusive, echoing off containers and bulkheads, making it impossible to tell if it was coming from above, below, or beside me. At first, I thought someone must be hurt or grieving, a common occurrence on long voyages. So, I moved toward where I thought the sobbing originated. But as I walked between the containers, the crying seemed to follow me, not as if someone was moving, but as if the sound came from every direction, bouncing through the ventilation or the ship's structure itself. Then the captain's 3rd rule struck me. If you hear a woman crying anywhere on the ship, lock yourself in the nearest room and wait until the sound stops. With my heart pounding, I found a heavy steel storage room door about 20 feet away, the kind meant to keep water out during rough seas. I rushed over, threw it open, and stepped into the cramped space filled with emergency supplies. The sobbing intensified as I entered, as though whatever was crying knew I was trying to escape. I spun the wheel lock tightly behind me, plunging the room into darkness save for the faint glow from my flashlight. The metallic scent of motor oil and rust surrounded me as I sat pressed against the cool wall. Minutes passed, and the sobbing grew louder, pressing against the door like an unseen presence. Sometimes it seemed frantic, with gasps for breath between sobs. At others, it lowered to a whisper, as if trying to muffle the noise. It never ceased, never wandered off. I counted the minutes through my watch. 20, 30. My legs cramped from sitting cramped in silence, battling the urge to open the door and help whomever was out there. But something deep inside told me this was no ordinary distress. The sound shifted just before midnight, becoming more desperate, overwhelming, like it was right outside the door, pressing against it. I could feel vibrations through the steel, like hands rapping on metal. Then, suddenly at midnight, the crying stopped. Not fading, but abruptly ending as if snapped off. The silence that followed was absolute. I unlocked the door cautiously and stepped back into the cargo hold. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Straps still loose, my flashlight resting where I'd put it. No footprints, no wet spots, no sign someone had been sobbing moments ago. The hold felt normal, but I knew the crying had been real and terrifyingly unnatural. As the days passed aboard the Nerius, I grew wary, attuned to every shadow and whisper. One evening, while heading toward the engine room to check on some repairs David had mentioned, I noticed a figure standing near the entrance. The dim corridor lighting made it difficult to identify, but the person wore the standard crew coveralls, probably David or James, I assumed, thinking to offer assistance or inquire about the maintenance. I approached. The figure remained perfectly still, ignoring my footsteps and failing to respond when I called out. Even when I grew louder, the person showed no reaction. Something about the absolute stillness disturbed me. Even the most focused crew member wouldn't entirely dismiss a greeting in such a quiet area. Then, as the figure slowly turned, my blood ran cold. Where a face should have been, there was nothing, just smooth, pale skin stretched taut from hairline to neck, devoid of eyes, nose, or mouth. The waxy texture seemed like a grotesque imitation of human flesh, lacking every familiar feature. Immediately, the captain's fourth rule struck me. Always verify crew members have visible faces before approaching. My entire body froze. The faceless entity tilted its head as if studying me despite its blank expression. Staying calm, I forced myself to step back slowly, avoiding eye contact or confrontation. I retreated without haste, not wanting to provoke it. Remarkably, it did not follow, though I sensed its gaze. No footsteps echoed behind me as I hurried through the corridors toward Captain Williams' office. Once inside, I reported what I'd seen. He listened with a practiced calm, then retrieved a crowbar from the wall cabinet. Together, we returned to the spot where the faceless figure remained motionless. Without hesitation, the captain raised the crowbar and struck the entity repeatedly. The metallic clangs echoed down the hallway, but the creature neither cried out nor reacted with pain. After several blows, it collapsed, limbs folding unnaturally, and astonishingly began dissolving into a dark, oily liquid. The sludge seeped into the ship's crevices until only faint stains and an acrid industrial scent remained. Captain William explained these imposters sometimes appear, mimicking crew but missing critical details. Their faces, their behaviors. No one knew what they were or their origin, but they were dangerous, replacing crew members until they're indistinguishable from the real ones. This was why the rule existed, to keep a wary eye on faces and avoid getting too close. The encounter left me shaken but resolute. Survival aboard the Nerius demanded strict adherence to these strange, terrifying rules. Captain Williams sat back in his chair, eyes narrowing as he addressed the unsettling events I'd reported. What you saw, the faceless crew member, is not a trick of the light or a hallucination. Those are one of the many shape-shifting entities that haunt the Nerius. They take the form of crew members, but miss crucial details, like the features on their faces. His voice was calm, but heavy with experience. These imposters are dangerous. They don't just mimic appearance. They attempt to replace real people. Once they get close, the real crew member might vanish forever, and the entity takes their place, keeping up appearances but with something off beneath the surface. I listened, the knots in my stomach tightening as he explained. The ship itself seems to draw these creatures, almost like a beacon. We don't understand why, but it's vital that the crew follows the rules to the letter. Each one was born from a lesson learned through painful experience. He leaned forward, the weight of years at sea evident in his tone. Rule 4, checking that crew members have visible faces, is critical. It's the best way to spot these entities before they can get close enough to do harm. They're patient and they're cunning. I don't know what these things are or where they come from, but I've been fighting to keep my crew alive for 3 years. Stick to the rules, Thompson, and you'll stand chance. His blue eyes locked with mine, steady and resolute. Those words hung in the stale air of the cramped office, driving home the terrifying reality lurking on the deck of a Nerius. As the violent storm battered the Nerius at Juneau, the fury of nature overwhelmed the ship, tossing it mercilessly like a toy boat caught in a tempest. After 2 weeks aboard, I had grown accustomed to distinguishing between typical rough seas and the brutal squalls that swept through southeast Alaska without warning. The rain lashed against my porthole with relentless intensity, while the wind howled fiercely through the rigging above deck. The ship rolled sharply from starboard to port, dislodging paperwork from my small desk. Knowing better than to try working amid such chaos, I hastily secured my documents, acknowledging the vessel's age in every creak and groan. We'd been anchored in Juneau's harbor since the previous morning, awaiting safer conditions to resume loading mining equipment destined for anchorage. Captain Harrison mentioned this cargo during a briefing, but the powerful winds made crane operation impossible, and the longshoremen halted work. In these tense moments, I found myself striving to adhere diligently to the captain's peculiar rules. I had memorized them fully. Never throw anything overboard. Avoid the deck between 2 and 3 a.m. Lock yourself in any time you hear a woman crying. Verify that crew members have faces, and if the power fails and a child cries, find a captain within 10 minutes or secure yourself safely. While David and James maintained a professional camaraderie, they skirted conversations about the ship's dark mysteries, turning instead to the routine aspects of seamanship. Seeking respite from the relentless storm, I reached for the galley door handle, planning to fetch some coffee. Suddenly, without warning, all lights aboard the ship vanished. A crushing silence fell as electrical power failed completely, plunging us into total darkness. The only sounds are the raging storm outside and the abrupt cessation of mechanical hums. Then, piercing the void, came the unmistakable sobbing of a child somewhere deep within the ship. The chilling sound cut through the darkness with a haunting clarity, terrifying me because I knew beyond doubt that no children were aboard the Nerius. Just 4 adult men, no passengers, and no younger souls. The 5th rule surged vividly into my mind. If the power goes out and you hear a child crying, you have exactly 10 minutes to locate Captain Harrison. Failing that, you must barricade yourself in a secure spot until power returns. Fumbling with my phone's flashlight, I noted the time, 11:47 p.m. determined. I stepped out into the pitch-black corridor. The child's cries echoed through the ship's ventilation, bouncing confusingly between ducts, impossible to pinpoint. Despite the weak beam slicing through the dark, I pushed forward toward the captain's office. Reaching his door, I found it empty, the room abandoned. The navigation charts lay untouched, as if no one had been there for hours. 8 minutes remained on the ticking clock. Next, I darted to the bridge, hoping to find him coordinating some emergency measures, but it too was deserted. Through the rain-streaked windows, I glimpsed Juneau's distant, flickering harbor lights, a stark contrast to our utter blackness. Meanwhile, the sobbing rose in urgency, seeming to track my footsteps through the empty hallways. With 6 minutes to spare, I hurried to the galley and then checked the cabins of David and James. Both were vacant, their whereabouts a mystery. They might have found shelter elsewhere, heeding the captain's unspoken counsel to lie low during strange happenings. Only 3 minutes remain now, and the crying transformed. No longer purely human, the distorted sobs bore a sinister undertone, as if filtered through alien vocal cords. I raced to the engine room, the last plausible refuge for the captain amid the chaos. Yet, the hallways began to warp beneath my eyes. Shadows thickened and corridors seemed longer, as if the ship itself conspired to trap me. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed behind me, slow and determined, unlike the swift reactions of alarmed crewmates. Desperation overwhelmed me. With 2 minutes left, I abandoned the search, opting instead for the nearest secure spot I could find. A supply closet just a few meters down the hall. It was dim but sturdy, outfitted with a heavy steel door and a wheel lock, the kind designed to withstand the ocean's fiercest battering. I sprinted inside, slamming the door behind me and locking the wheel. Just as the clock struck 11:57 p.m., the child's sobbing intensified, as if sensing my escape attempt. Suddenly, immense force slammed against the door, shaking the frame violently. Cleaning supplies rattled on the shelves. The door groaned under the weight of something monstrous pressing from outside. My skin crawled as long, deliberate scrapes cut across the steel door. Claw marks, not fingernails. The sound was methodical, practiced, as if this creature had breached once before and was determined to succeed. Trapped in that cramped closet, I clung to stillness, conserving my phone's battery while battling the overwhelming dread. The cries alternated with guttural growls, not made by any human throat. Hours passed as the relentless pressure ebbed and flowed. Finally, around 3 a.m., the attack slackened, the door's screams of strain fading to silence. The sobbing retreated to a distant echo, then ceased altogether. I remained locked within that shadowed cell, heart pounding, until well after dawn. At 6:15 a.m., light flickered back throughout the vessel, the return of power relieving me as if I had been pulled from a nightmare. Stepping outside, I examined the battered steel door. Deep gouges carved in parallel lines marred its surface, proof of the night's ordeal. The lock was dented and scratched, a stark reminder of the clawed beast that almost broke through. I knew then that adhering strictly to Captain Harrison's rules wasn't mere superstition. It was the only way to survive what haunted the Nerius. I was organizing inventory sheets in my quarters when a storm hit Juneau with a fury that made the Nerius feel like a toy boat. 2 weeks on board had taught me to distinguish between normal rough weather and the violent squalls that could sweep through southeast Alaska without warning. Rain pelted my porthole relentlessly, while wind howled through the rigging above deck. The ship rolled hard from starboard to port, shaking everything inside. Paper slid off my desk as the vessel bucked like a wild horse. I secured the loose sheets quickly, knowing better than to attempt paperwork in such conditions. We've been anchored in Juneau's protected harbor since yesterday, waiting for the dock crews to finish loading mining equipment bound for Anchorage. The longshoremen had halted work because of the 40-knot winds, refusing to operate cranes in such a storm. After 2 weeks of navigating the ship's strange supernatural events, my routine had settled. I kept sharp, always checking every crew member's face before approaching, avoiding certain areas during forbidden hours, and holding the captain's rules firmly in mind. David and James remained professional, including me in conversations about ship operations, but never mentioning anything beyond the ordinary. No allusions to the eerie occurrences. The storm worsened outside, and rather than stay cramped in my cabin, listening to the ship's superstructure groan under assault, I decided to head to the galley for coffee. Just as I reached for the door handle, every light on the ship abruptly went out. Total darkness swallowed the vessel instantly. No flicker, no warning, just an immediate blackout. The only sound were the storm's rage outside and the grinding halt of machinery. Then I heard it, A child crying somewhere deep within the ship. The sobs sliced through the darkness, chilling in their impossibility. No children were aboard. Our crew numbered just 4 adult men. No passengers, no families. But now, in the black corridors, a child cried with broken-hearted desperation, the kind of sound that only comes from pure fear and abandonment. Rule 5 crashed into my mind. If the power goes out and you hear a child crying, you have exactly 10 minutes to find Captain. If you can't find him, barricade yourself in the nearest secure place until power's restored. Heart pounding, I fumble for my phone, flicking on the flashlight. The digital clock read 11:47 p.m. I had until 11:57 to find Captain William, or hide. The sobbing pursued me as I stepped into the corridor, the sound echoing through ventilation shafts, making it impossible to locate. My phone's glow barely pushed back the darkness as I hurried toward the captain's quarters. Each step brought the cries closer, like they tracked my progress through the forsaken ship. Captain Harrison's office near the bridge was empty. No sign of him. The navigation charts lay untouched, the chair vacant as if abandoned hours ago. I glanced at my phone. 11:49, still 8 minutes left. Racing to the bridge, I found no one there either. Equipment was dark, silence absolute except for the storm and the crying, which had grown frantic. The tears were no longer distant. They seemed to chase me. 6 minutes remained. I darted through empty crew quarters and the deserted galley, finding every cabin bare. Perhaps the others had secured themselves already. The crying had transformed. The voice was deeper, distorted like some twisted imitation of humanity. Shadows stretched and twisted along the walls as I moved rapidly, my light flickering. I headed toward the engine room, the last likely refuge for the captain. The narrow corridors felt alien, longer, darker, alive with menace. Heavy footsteps echoed behind me, slow and deliberate. Not the hurried pace of crew responding to emergency, but the calculated amble of something that knew its prey. With 2 minutes left, I abandoned searching for the captain. Instead, I sought the near secure room. 20 feet down the hall, a supply closet with a heavy steel door and a wheel lock caught the faint beam of my phone. 1 minute left. I sprinted inside and slammed the door behind me, spinning the wheel lock tight as the clock struck 11:57. The child's sobbing exploded louder, almost furious, like whatever was outside knew I'd escaped and was enraged. Then came the pounding. Massive thuds rattled the door, shaking shelves and spilling cleaning supplies to the floor. I crouched against the back wall, heart hammering, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Beyond the door, claws scraped deep, deliberate scrapes that tore into the steel as though the thing had done this before, probing for weakness. The crying twisted into guttural growls that defied human origins. I remained utterly still, breath shallow, light off to save battery. The darkness crushed around me, suffocating like a metal coffin, while something monstrous tested the door with relentless persistence. Hours passed in the suffocating silence, punctuated only by the scratching, the growls, and the heavy weight pressing against the door. At one point, the steel creaked ominously under the strain, threatening to give way. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the assault ceased. The crying faded into nothingness. The darkness was broken only by the soft creaks of a ship settling amid the storm's fury outside. I stayed locked away for an hour more, reluctant to face the black corridors, until well after dawn, when the lights finally flickered back on around 6:15 a.m. Relief washed over me. The ship was ordinary again. Unlocking the door, I found the damaged plane. Deep, parallel gouges clawed into the metal, scars testament to the night's terror. The lock was dented, scraped beyond anything human strength could explain. Whatever had hunted me outside that door was something else entirely, and had come perilously close to breaking in. I sought out Captain Harrison in the engine room later that morning. He bore a fresh bruise on his forehead and dried blood at his temple, looking as weary as I felt. He told me he'd been knocked unconscious trying to restore power just after midnight. "You did exactly right," he said gravely when I recounted the night's desperate hours. "This thing hunts during blackouts, uses children's voices to lure people out of safety, and when it finds resistance, it gets violent. We examined the scarred door together. These marks are getting worse," he noted. "Usually, they give up after a few hours. That one worked on your door most of the night." His grave tone left no room for doubt. The Nerius was no ordinary cargo ship. This voyage was far from over, and the night's survival was only a painful reminder of what awaited me in the dark waters ahead. After my harrowing encounter with a faceless entity, I sought out Captain William Harrison in his cramped office to demand answers. For weeks, I had carried the weight of the strange rules and the eerie happenings aboard the Nerius, but now I needed the truth. The captain's steely gaze met mine as I laid the rules on his desk like evidence. These weren't mere safety protocols. They were survival instructions for threats that defied explanation. Captain Harrison finally opened up, his voice steady but heavy with the burden of untold stories. The Nerius had vanished 14 months earlier on a routine cargo run to Alaska. The entire crew disappeared without a trace. No distress call, no wreckage, nothing. It was as if they had simply ceased to exist. Then, 8 months later, the ship reappeared at Tacoma Harbor, manned by an entirely new crew who claimed to have served aboard for years, remarkably with no memory of the disappearance. The captain showed me a collection of handwritten notes, each bearing variations of the same 5 rules I had been given. These scraps of paper had been left behind by crews long gone, but not forgotten. Crews who would face these supernatural dangers and live to pass on what they'd learned. The ship itself seemed to act like a magnet for these entities, drawing them ever closer as we sailed north. Harrison confided that despite repeated attempts to retire the vessel, the Nerius always returned to service, each time drawing new, unsuspecting souls into its ghostly orbit. He had been the one to survive the longest, 3 years steering this cursed ship through an invisible war. The pay was good, but it came with a grim price. Most crew members didn't last beyond their first few weeks. I asked him why he stayed. He answered simply, someone had to keep the rules alive, teach the new crew how to survive, and bear the crushing weight of responsibility. I understood then the heavy loneliness behind his stern demeanor, the cost of fighting a battle few could see or believe. Faced with this chilling reality, I wrestled with my choices. The danger was real, yet the job paid far better than anything else I could find. With rent overdue and savings gone, walking away wasn't just an option. It was a luxury I couldn't afford. After a long silence, I told Harrison I would remain aboard for the return journey, but I wanted to understand more, to learn what drew these beings, how they operated, and anything that might offer a sliver of hope for surviving the deadly voyage ahead. The captain's eyes showed a rare flicker of relief, but warned sharply that curiosity could be as dangerous as the creatures themselves. Ignorance was sometimes the safest harbor aboard the Nerius. As I left his office, I passed the supply closet with its claw-marked door, the scars a grim reminder of the darkness lurking just beyond locked steel. I had faced the unimaginable, survived by following rules that defied logic. Now, fully aware of what haunted the ship, I had committed myself to the journey home, whatever horrors awaited me on the path back to Seattle. After hearing Captain Williams' revelations about the Nerius's haunted past and the eerie fates of its previous crews, I was left with a profound dilemma. The supernatural dangers aboard the ship were undeniable. Entities without faces stalking the corridors, agonizing cries echoing through empty holds, and claw marks on steel doors that whispered of horrors narrowly escaped. The truth was chilling, and my initial impulse was to abandon the voyage altogether, but the harsh realities pulled me back. 3 months of unemployment had drained me financially, with rent and bills looming over me like storm clouds. The pay aboard the Nerius was good precisely because of these dangers, and walking away meant falling back into uncertainty and struggle. Furthermore, I had seen firsthand the power of the captain's rules, how they had saved my skin during nightmarish encounters. I knew now that survival hinged on strict obedience and vigilance. So I made my choice. I would stay for the return trip to Seattle, but this time, not just to survive. I wanted to understand more. I needed to grasp what attracted these entities to the ship, how they operated, and whether there was a way to protect ourselves better. Captain William cautioned that curiosity could be perilous here, that sometimes ignoring the unnatural was our safest path. Yet, armed with this knowledge and resolve, I was ready to face the unknown. The next day, as the Nerius prepared to set sail southbound, I tucked the captain's worn list of rules back into my pocket. Each scratched line on the supply closet door I passed reminded me of the thin line between life and oblivion on this ship. Whatever lay ahead, I understood now that adherence to those rules was not just a matter of duty. It was the difference between returning home and disappearing into the unforgiving depths. As the Nerius readied for its journey back to Seattle, I found myself reflecting deeply on the weight of the captain's rules and the horrors they were meant to protect against. The ship hummed with a restless energy, the crew moving through their routines with a quiet, practiced efficiency that masked the unease beneath. The memories of faceless figures, anguished cries, and relentless claws scraping steel lingered like shadows in the corridors. Captain William remained as steadfast and composed as ever, his piercing blue eyes scanning the manifest and coordinating logistics with port officials. He didn't speak much about the supernatural threats during these preparations, but the gravity behind his demeanor said enough. I understood now that these rules were not mere superstition. They were survival tools, honed through years of facing unexplainable terrors. As I secured my gear and double-checked cargo tie-downs, I reminded myself to remain vigilant, especially during the hours the rules warned about. The looming knowledge that the entities became more active on the southbound leg of our voyage settled heavily on my mind, but I knew compliance was my best hope. The crew's guarded conversations and the silence about the ship's dark history underscored the peril awaiting us. The fading light of Anchorage Harbor cast long shadows over the deck. As the Nerius prepared to cast off, I felt a mix of dread and determination, resolved to unravel the mysteries that clung to the ship without compromising my own safety. Following the captain's guidance was crucial, but my curiosity also pushed me to seek understanding about the entity's nature and the reasons behind their haunting presence. With the ship's engines rumbling to life and the distant outline of the Alaskan coastline disappearing behind us, the return voyage began, a test of endurance, nerves, and adherence to the fragile rules that stood between us and the unknown horrors lurking just beyond the reach of the sea. Michael's journey aboard the Nerius unveils the fragile boundary separating reality from the supernatural, through unwavering adherence to Captain Harrison's strict rules. Michael aims not only to endure the hazards posed by the treacherous sea, but also to withstand the otherworldly terrors that infest the ship. His story stands as a testament to survival against incomprehensible forces, where discipline and caution become the only shields in a realm where ordinary logic fails. If you found this chilling account of life aboard the Nerius compelling, please subscribe for more gripping stories. Like the video to show your support, leave a comment sharing your thoughts or theories, and share this haunting tale with friends who crave the mysterious and unexplained. Your engagement helps keep these eerie journeys alive.